And the final journey for Congressman John Lewis in Atlanta showed the impact he left on his home. From the moment his casket arrived at the Dobbins Air Reserve Base to the state capitol, people lined the roads to wave goodbye, some even cheering, applauding. From John Lewis Freedom Parkway to his mural on Auburn Avenue before arriving at the state capitol. There was a brief ceremony for family members and political leaders, including Governor Brian Kemp and Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms at the state capitol for Lewis. Nick Sturdivant joins us live there with more on how the governor and Atlanta's mayor honored Lewis. Good morning, Nick.
Good morning, Francesca. And they both spoke about what Lewis meant to not only the state of Georgia, but the rest of the nation. Governor Kemp presented the state flag to Lewis's son, and Mayor Bottoms spoke about her personal connection to Lewis and his family, and says the last time she spoke with him was on a Zoom call with former President Barack Obama. Governor Kemp also spoke about Lewis's leadership and said his legacy should continue to serve as our country's conscience.
His example taught us that we have nothing to lose and everything to gain by working together and loving one another.
Although the fight for liberty and equality continues, Congressman Lewis reminded us to be hopeful, to be optimistic, and to never lose a sense of hope.
And Francesca, we mentioned this earlier, but Congressman Lewis is still inside the state capitol. He plans to leave, well, they plan to take his casket to Ebenezer Baptist Church at 8 o'clock. And one thing that we noticed before this live shot, it appears to be sort of like a small group outside of the state capitol waiting to see him off to Ebenezer.
I'm sure we will see much more of that today, Nick. Thank you so much.